All right, so picking up here with the scientific method, I definitely want you to be familiar with how the scientific method is defined and the purpose of why is it here in psychology. Well, it's in psychology because psychology is a behavioral science that's built on research and built on theory. So if you have a theory, we just can't go with your theory. We got to prove or disprove that your theory was right. So this is why you see the scientific method as a part of psychology, just strictly based on research. So the scientific method is a set of assumptions, attitudes, and procedures that guide researchers to either prove or disprove their theory. Okay, so let's go to the next slide that breaks it down even further. So we have our different steps. Be familiar with them. Formulate a testable hypothesis. All right, design the study and collect the data, analyze the data and draw the conclusion, and then report the findings, whether good or bad. All right, and so this goes deeper than what you can actually think of. Think of the medication industry. It's $1 billion industry. So when we have all these recalls, a lot of times people start questioning, well, why in the world do we have these recalls? Didn't they know that these adverse side effects were a part of these medications? Yeah, they did. They saw that because it got reported in the findings, and when they analyzed the data, all of that became known, okay, information. But the hope is hey, we'll generate enough money to put out there, we'll make billions, and so if we make the billions, then we can pay out these class action suits. Or you have some people that didn't test further as they needed to test certain areas to see, oh wow, this is how this affects this part of it. All right, so you have some people that know, some people that don't know, but anything that's related to the medical field has to have research conducted on it. But a lot of times when you see these people forming these class action suits and things like that, sometimes they know that these were going to be the effects of a person having cancer or something like that. So, or you may have a person that has this theory and they're very, very close to proving it, but will totally reject any information that shows that this isn't the theory at 100%, and then they will publish it and people will not go through the whole research process. They'll just believe them at face value based on their data and things like that. So they'll say, hey, this person did this wonderful, great thing. But then you'll have a person that says, hey, I've been doing the same thing and I've coming up with this results. How is this person coming up with something similar? So you'll get a person that will go through that, another researcher, and say, hey, this person has to be lying because these are what the results show. And so they showed that the person was just lying the whole time, but the person wanted some type of notoriety, grants, some type of tenure, some type of money. It's something attached to it, the reason why this person has, in essence, lied about their whole research. But it's done all the time. All right, so some bits and pieces, some parts of the scientific method that I want you to be familiar with is going to be the hypothesis, as you saw earlier in the scientific method, maybe a slide or two ago. Variable, all right, be familiar with the definition of that, a factor that can vary or change when it's observed. This is part of the research process. Let's see here. Theory. A tentative explanation. You've heard me say that many times throughout this lecture. A tentative explanation that tries to integrate and account for the relationship of various findings and observations. All right, and if I'm not saying the word or something like that, don't want you to be familiar with it. You won't see it. It'll be considered FYI, okay, for your information. All right, so they just bring about or just go over theory again. Descriptive research, FYI, naturalistic observation. Whole goal of it is to observe and record behavior on something or someone in their natural habitat, natural environment. So I would say put an asterisk by that. Definitely will see that on your Chapter 1 exam. All right, case studies. Case studies are often a part of a research process throughout the scientific method. What a case study is a very detailed description of an individual. And it gives you, it's almost like storytelling, and it gives you all the details that you need to draw a conclusion, okay? And so the purpose of them is typically to investigate something, describe an extreme condition, but ultimately it's to gain feedback. Okay, so it's useful in clinical trials, anything that's related to the brain, those type of areas. All right, surveys. We've heard about them. We can't stand them most times if they ask you when you're calling to pay a bill or calling to ask a question, hey, would you do this survey at the end of this call? We typically press number 2. No, we don't want to. But in research, it's absolutely necessary because the researcher is hoping that the person is, one, going to answer in a non-biased way and answer truthfully. All right, so it is a questionnaire, it's a series of questions, or even an interview that is designed to investigate the opinions, behaviors, or characteristics of a particular group. Whatever that particular group is, that's the group that that researcher is focusing on, because they're wanting to gain some type of information, some type of data that's going to be directly related to their research, okay? And based on their answers, it gives them a really great snapshot of how people assess this particular situation, how they answer that question, how these people's thoughts and feelings about, a particular situation or event. All right, sample wants to be familiar with the term sample and random selection. Sample, a selected segment of the population used to represent the group that is being studied, okay? So a sample could be, let's say if I was going to study, for instance, college students, then I can randomly pick any college student, okay? Because I'm trying to see the behaviors of college student, maybe test preparation. That one person that I choose, one college student, would be my sample. All right. Random selection would be me not choosing one of my students per se, but it would be any student that I saw that was walking around the Augusta Tech campus and said, hey, would you be a part of my study? Okay, that would be me randomly selecting someone. Don't know them, just by chance. All right. All right, so correlations, if you ever hear the term, and this is really just FYI, because a lot of this, I just want you to know so you're aware of it, not that you're going to be tested on. So if you hear the terms correlation, it's just showing how two things are related to each other, okay? Next two terms you need to be familiar with as it applies to the research methods, and I really want you to read in your text how it goes more in depth into the research method, gives you some examples of some research that has occurred. Look at the independent variable definition, also called the treatment variable, and then the dependent variable, also called the outcome variable. You can look at some examples of studies where they'll give you an example about testing of intelligence of twins, or testing of intelligence on infants where one was bottle fed versus one was breastfed, and who's the one that's going to be considered more intelligent. Is there some type of correlation there? Okay, some type of relationship with those that are breastfed versus those that are formula bottle fed. And so in those situations, the bottle fed, breastfed would be the treatment variable. That would be the independent variable, okay? Could be manipulated by the experimenter. Now, what can't be manipulated would be the intelligence. So if we tested those two children, once they got to a point that they could be tested and do assessments on and things of that nature, how they score as far as the level of intelligence would be the dependent variable, the outcome variable. So be familiar with those terms. All right, just read over that. You can look over random assignment, just FYI. Critical thinking. Critical thinking is very important when it comes to psychology. I often say the term you can think of is like having common sense. But critical thinking is absolutely necessary in psychology because there's all types of drives, motivations of why a person would want something or theorize something or want the results to be something in particular. So you got to use critical thinking to see, is this the reason why? Is this non-biased? Should I be going along with this, or should I do further research for myself? So that's why it says think like a psychologist. In critical thinking, identify the claim. All right. Let's say this whole theory of the earth being flat versus round. Okay. So this is the claim. Earth flat versus round. Got it. Now I got to go and evaluate the evidence. Okay. And seen for all these years that I've been on this earth that the earth appears to be round. Okay. But I got to go out and actually do some research to see what results, what information, how valid is that information that people have actually shown, maybe some measurements, shown some pictures to kind of validate this is why the earth is flat. Okay. Consider the alternative explanations. You'll find that, or you'll consider that as you look through your research, as you evaluate your evidence, and then consider the source of the research or claim. Now, here's where it gets it's important. Let's say you are doing some extensive research, okay, trying to actually see if the earth is flat versus round. Well, you wouldn't go out to Wikipedia and then you're saying, this is the data that I'm going to assess as being valid. No, because that's not a valid source of information. Anybody can go in and edit Wikipedia. This is why your professors, instructors, teachers say don't use Wikipedia, don't use it as a source, because anybody can go in and change it. Consider the source, okay? Is it a valid source? All right, something to think about. All right, so let's go back really quickly. All right, I'll pick up from here. Yes, I'll pick up from this slide. All right, so here is the ethics in psychological research. This is just FYI, okay? But it's very important that you know why we had the APA developed. Because people were doing all types of unethical things when it came to research, okay? They were traumatizing people. They were hurting people, like physically and mentally would be the traumatizing of people. And then some things they were doing were just totally out there. So they had to come up with a code of ethics for people to follow if they are going to conduct research, which we're so glad that they did. So there are 5 key provisions in the most recent APA guidelines, okay, when you're using any type of human participants. And here you see the research that was done. It was on obedience. You'll see it when we go into it. We'll definitely talk about it. You'll see the video from it where it was Stanley Milgram's video where basically it was based on total deception, but it traumatized people mentally. All right, so one of the first ones out of the 5, informed consent and voluntary participation. Can't make someone be a part of your research, all right? And you also, if the person says, hey, okay, that's fine, I would love to do your research, you got to inform them of the potential risk, the discomfort, some type of emotional experiences that may occur, anything that they may need to know that is of some level of importance to them and that could affect them after the research is conducted. You got to inform them of it. So that's the informed consent. Students as research participants. When research participation is a course requirement or an opportunity for extra credit, the student must be given the choice of an alternative activity to fulfill the course requirement or earn extra credit. Why? Because guess what? I'm forcing you, almost really, or you're feeling obligated to do this research without any other outs if I don't give you one, okay? So they leave that in there so that the student doesn't feel obligated to be a part of a research that they may not want to. All right, the use of deception. This was done in Stanley Milgram's experiment. All right, it is not, psychologists can use deceptive techniques if it is not feasible to use alternatives that do not involve deception. And also if the potential findings justify the use of deception because of their scientific, educational, or applied value. All right, they really skated the line with that with Stanley Milgram's experiment. All right. Next is the confidentiality of information. Anything that they're writing, anything that they publish, any public forums, they cannot disclose your personal information. All right. Then information about the study and debriefing. They have to give you feedback on their findings, the conclusion of the research and things of that nature. So you are due that much. And then this just gives you some study techniques, just FYI, for students' closing thoughts. And that concludes chapter 1.